And today I'm very excited to have Scott Hawkyard with me, who's a fellow who I've known for a number of years. And he reached out to me recently because he did something every one of us needs to do from time to time. And in 2022, it's quite a different experience: the job hunt. So, hey, Scott, just to give people context for our conversation, can you just give us a little bit of framing about your background experience, and then let's dive into the details of what you've just been through?
Sure. Yeah, Matt. Thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it. I reached out to you after I went through this whole process, thinking I know that you'll find this valuable, just the kinds of people that SaaSy works with. I knew that you would find it valuable, and I think a lot of your members will find it very valuable too. So my experience is I've got over 25 years software sales experience. I started in 1994 or something around, and I did a lot of transactional sales for many years. I kind of grew into some partner sales for a few years, worked with different companies, large and small, startup, VMware, Yahoo, those kinds of things about 12, 13 years ago. But in the last 6 years, most of my relevancy towards my job search was developed over the last 6 years. Enterprise sales in the MarTech industry, selling customer loyalty programs, referral programs, things like that. Things that solutions that actually increase conversion rates, acquisition, retention, that kind of thing. So I have really been focused in that market, and that's where I wanted to stay.
Love it. And so as you're thinking about this interview, people who are listening, we've got a guy here in Scott who has got a ton of experience. We're not talking about a rookie. We've got sort of the A-grade profile for somebody. And in particular, because Scott, you really focused your search efforts specifically around your area of expertise in recent times, which is MarTech. So the numbers we're going to share and the process we're going to share really is, in my view, best case scenario, because you are a perfect fit for the companies that you approached and the roles you looked at. So let's talk about this. I mean, I'd love to start with some numbers, and like any great sales leader or salesperson, you've really broken down the numbers and the ratios. Can you walk us through what people should expect based on your experience? You started the search July 2nd this year, 2021. Walk us through the numbers. What did you send? What was your response rates like?
So when I got serious, when I decided, hey, I'm going to leave my current job. I mean, I had started the search before this, and I was kind of, lollygagging around for a couple of months and said, I think I want to leave. I don't want to live, that kind of thing. On July 2nd of this year, I told my wife, I am leaving, period. So what am I going to do? I got to approach it like a sales cycle. I knew that I needed to clean up my resume. I knew I needed to find, appropriate jobs for me. I didn't want to waste a lot of time. So I ended up sending out about 160 applications. That took me about a week and a half, I'd say, total. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there right now. I was really surprised at how many relevant jobs there were for enterprise software sales in the MarTech industry. A lot of new data companies, a lot of new tools are coming out that are very interesting. So send out about 160 job apps.
And Scott, you said to me that you've got like a top two, like people will want to know, where did you find those roles? So I think you had a couple that you think were very good.
LinkedIn was definitely my favorite. I made sure I cleaned up my LinkedIn profile, made sure my resume was like a lot cleaner. My resume hadn't been working so well the last couple of years. I noticed that. If I back up in time, I'd send it out to a few people and it just didn't get a lot of responses. So I came in, making sure I came in prepared, a clean resume. I was basing it on other salespeople like me, asking a lot of questions, but I wanted to make sure that I had a clean resume. Used LinkedIn, and Indeed was another good source. I'm not going to say it was as good, but it was easy to find a lot of high-paying, enterprise sales jobs for sure. So, but most of it, I would say 80 to 90% was all done on LinkedIn.
And those applications, the 160, was that 100% outbound, or some of that were in response to inbounds?
So that was me sending. Those are me sending. That's Scott sending out about 160 relevant applications.
Okay. Yep. And talk me through the numbers. What happened? How many of those got a response?
So got about 40 responses, about 25, about 1 out of 4 was coming in. And I was surprised. And when I mean responses, I mean like, hey, we're really interested in, they have this standard form that you'll see come back. It says, either we decided you're not a great fit, or, hey, we decided you are a good fit. Can we schedule an interview? And typically what'll happen is you'll get a response. There'll be a calendar or something like that, and you can make your first appointment with the interviewer. So I got about 40 of those responses. I decided 7 or 8 were not appropriate. We're not appropriate. So I ended up with 32 first interviews. Ended up going through the process. I had to create an Excel spreadsheet. I noticed during, this didn't happen overnight. I noticed I was getting so many interview requests, and I had to use a separate Yahoo calendar. I didn't want it on my business calendar, obviously. And then I ended up creating an Excel spreadsheet, and I started creating like different fields, like figuring out, which companies I like better, why, what the base salary was, what the on-target earnings, how the boss was. Kind of has started learning, I better start treating this like a real sales cycle, like really qualifying these folks and making sure I'm a good fit for them and they're a good fit for me. So ended up with 32 first interviews, about 20 second interviews. The 12 or so that dropped off were just, some of them, they decided I wasn't a good fit, maybe for whatever reason. And then I decided, but we mutually, decided together. Got 2 written offers before July was up. So got 2 and I mean written offers in the fact that I could have got more if I would have, I stuck to my base, my high base. I actually went a little higher than I thought I could make. And the 2 offers were right on par with the highest base I'd asked for. And
I have a question for you. Those first interviews, 32 of them, do you remember roughly how many were with recruiters versus the hiring manager?
Probably about 20% were with outside recruiters, and the other 80% with hiring managers, I would say.
Okay,
sure.
We'll come back and talk about that because I definitely have a perspective on that. And I'm assuming the second interview, now were any of those second interviews with someone other than the person you would be working for directly?
Yes, a couple of the interviews I had with somebody who would maybe be the first initial recruiter. Pretty basic, they were just trying to, some of them were just asking me a set of questions. They really didn't know the position as well. But I'd walk through that. And then a lot of times the second interview could be with somebody who's actually the real recruiter in some cases, or the boss. It's just dependent on the situation. But some of them were with who would be my boss, and some of them were people who would not be.
Got it. Interesting. And look, something I'll say to folks is, and I know you believe the same. One of the most important relationships you'll have professionally, of course, is your boss. And if you're trying to attract an A-grade candidate like Scott, you're going to want to know, Scott, who the heck am I going to work for? I mean, that's an immediate filter, because you could stop it at that point, right? If there's no chemistry there's somebody that you don't believe is going to help you, you may as well not continue. So you can't outsource the hiring process. And there are a number of companies that I've worked with who are in a velocity sales hiring motion. They're just hiring cohorts of 20 and 30 people. And therefore they sort of have a pooled hiring arrangement where peers will interview for somebody else. Who knows who the IC is going to work for, but we're all managers, so we'll just take that load. I really don't like that. And I really believe that most A players will not move forward with you because they want to know in advance, who's my boss going to be? Fair?
Very fair. That's exactly. And the chemistry with my boss, it's like me getting along with you. I remember going through your training years ago and always had a great feeling about you. I mean, it's not always what you said, but I always remember Matt's a really good guy. And I know I've reached out to you throughout the years with different things. And so, something along the same lines, if I had a good feeling, if I interviewed with who would be my boss, I had to have a good, solid feeling. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to be micromanaged. I wanted to make sure they understood my value. I wanted to understand that they knew my job. Where sometimes some of the managers were so disconnected, they really didn't know the job, which was, like at all. So I was asking them questions and I thought, ooh, this could be a little dicey, because if they don't know the job that well, how many the resources or tools or even being measured on something that they don't understand, that all mattered. Having them being friendly, knowing that, I'm going to be spending, possibly years with this person, and daily possibly. And it's a big deal. It's really, you're married to this company and this person for a long time. It's that intense in what we do.
100%. Now, you had 160 outbounds. Do you remember roughly how many inbounds came once you sort of made it known that you're, and I guess you were still employed, so it's not like you were hanging a shingle out, but many inbounds that you pursued?
So one thing that happens with LinkedIn, there is a setting that you can put on there as a candidate. You can put that you're open to new opportunities, and then they know not to, if your employer's on there, because they come in with domain, maybe they don't show them that you're open to new opportunities. when I clicked that little button, it started kind of a little spigot of probably 50% more people reaching out to me during July. I put it in there, and I was amazed at how that changed as well, the inbounds.
Got it. And did any of those inbounds get serious for you?
I ended up taking a job. The job I actually took was from an inbound lead.
How about that? How about that?
Yeah, it was amazing. And to be, I'll describe it a little bit further. I was just practicing interviewing with this job. I mean, I was literally, I had realized I was rusty at first and started interviewing. I thought, wow, I am, I'm a little bit older. I'm not used to all this fast-paced technology all day. Yes, I use Zoom. I close deals, but a lot of stuff that we close in enterprises, you have to analyze it. You prepare. You have calls with the original discovery calls. You have calls with the doing demos with teams, breaking out. So there's like this process. This interview process moves fast, and I was very surprised. And so I had to make a lot of adjustments. And luckily, it was probably the fourth or fifth interview. I just started getting the swing of things, getting feeling comfortable. The company I ended up being hired from was there, and we hit it off. It's like my very first really awesome interview where I walked. We both said, "Wow, that was." He even said, "That was really good." We're finishing each other's sentences. I said, "I know, man. I could, I honestly really like you." And he goes, and I don't say that very often, but that was kind of the human bonding took place over Zoom, and I was amazed. That was incredible.
I love it. Let's give some advice for employers, because most people who listen to this are hiring folks. So just some do's. Let's some do's and don'ts to start with. So what sort of things, some positive affirmation, what some good experiences you had that you think employers should take note of?
So some of the good experiences were when they asked solid questions, when they asked me what I understood about the company. That was important because I wanted them to qualify me right off the bat to know that I would come to an interview prepared. I made sure I was on time, made sure I was dressed appropriately, made sure, I was listening. I had a little homework on it. I made sure I had the homework done, where that kind of thing. If they asked me to have some collateral and understand stuff, I came in that first interview prepared. So I appreciated when they had some preparation for me, when they asked me the right questions, because then I knew that they were listening. They wanted me to articulate what their company does, what they sell. And then I liked it when they let me ask a lot of, or when it was a genuine interview. It wasn't just a list of questions, when it felt conversational, like we're having right now, where hey, like I would ask, what is it like to be in this job daily? What's my expectations? And they kind of walked through that. And then it was just a transfer really of information. The job market's hot right now, and so it's really important to be able to make that connection. I appreciated the ones that were genuinely interested in asking me the right questions and making sure that I was going to be a good fit for the company, just like I would. So it goes both ways. So I would be a good fit for them, and they'd be a good fit for me. Those are the best interviewers.
Got it. And what about some of the don'ts, would you say? Some things you observed? Some
of the don'ts for the company or for the person?
For the company, for the employer, yeah. You mentioned about homework there, and did you have some experience around that?
Yeah. So what happened was during the first and second, so there were a lot of second interviews I got, and I really wanted. There were a few really great companies, great opportunities. They were companies that had over 1,000 employees, which they get. Those are different dynamics than if somebody has 100 or 200 employees or 50 or whatever. And so I was given a lot of homework by some of those companies, and I knew I'd be a good fit. I had been selling the same systems that they sold. But they wanted me to do quite a bit of homework and prepare these demos and do a discovery call and that kind of stuff, which I'm used to doing. But in the flow of my regular job, it was not like I quit my job and all these other interviews. I had to be careful, and I started having to prioritize and say, this might be a great opportunity, but I need to focus on bird in hand. I've got these other opportunities that are very similar, and they're making it a little bit easier for me to walk through the process. Don't give us too much homework to do. You can give us some, but not a bunch of written homework and a bunch of stuff that's going to take us 4 hours to study for. That's what made it hard.
That timing makes me think of another thing we talked about before, which was sort of delays for you. Can you talk me a little bit about that in terms of the process?
Yeah, one of the companies I really wanted to work for, some of the outbound companies, I'll say, part of the 160 was about 20 or so that I had targeted that I thought I'd be a good fit for. They were selling exactly the kind of thing I'm selling now. But what happened was, even some, and they were looking for somebody like me. They were delaying, like, hey, listen, our main recruiter is not going to be in for a week, or this process takes a good month or something like that. Sometimes a lot of them are honest, but a few of them, it's going to take a good month to get through the whole process. And I'm thinking, wow, that's what happens if I go through the process and they don't make me an offer and I turn down other offers that are really good. That was my concern. So they're basically delayed between the first interview, the second interview, getting me to the boss, having me maybe interview with the VP, making a decision, even a sales team. Some of these were 3 or 4 or 5 interviews, believe it or not. And some of those just delayed. I just didn't want to wait around till August, September to make a decision and turn down stuff that I might actually like. So.
Yeah, a real good point. When the market's hot, you've got to have a very streamlined process and also give real clarity to it, right? You're going to meet this person tomorrow, this person Thursday, and we're going to tell you yes or no on Friday or whatever it happens to be, right? Certainty really matters. Yes. And like you said earlier, that who your boss would be very important and asking great questions to understand their management style. But you also said to me something that, quality of culture, the company benefits, and you made mention of Glassdoor. Talk to me about that. Like, did during these processes and the one you chose in the end, did you speak to folks who would be your colleagues and whatnot? How do you get a feel for the culture of a company?
It's harder when they're a brand new startup, but part of it was going to Glassdoor and then just doing, go to Glassdoor and read the details. Sometimes you'll see companies post like these marketing messages that makes them sound great, but you have to kind of look into the details of like, if you start seeing words like they're not honest or, those kinds of things, those are red flags. Look at Glassdoor, understand, kind of get used to which ones might be company reviews and which ones are real honest employee or past employee reviews. And which ones might be sour grapes and things like that. That happens too. So understand Glassdoor, understand how it works, and also do some queries on Google and just say, hey, is this a good company to work for? Reviews, and just kind of learn a little bit about the culture, learn a little about the news, what, the investors, that kind of stuff. That all matters. Also, you want to know about their benefits and, that kind of thing. My wife was more interested in that than I was. So I had to get kind of a list of all that. Make sure they have a 401k, if they have stock options, and clarity, not vagueness. If they have a real good package, you want to know what that package is. Because again, we're qualifying these people. I was qualifying these companies pretty fast, and the more information they could provide me in a more concise manner, it just made it easy for me to move them forward.
Yeah, 100%. And it was funny because I was speaking to someone earlier today who joined the company not a month ago, and they got there. They basically represented to me that told me that they were represented a bunch of falsehoods, and so the things were completely changed once they got inside the door. So one very tactical piece of advice, let's talk about the job seeker now. I would give people is go to LinkedIn Sales Navigator, look for that company and find people that was their past employer, and then look at that list and just reach out to them cold and say, hey, you left Acme. I'm thinking about a job as Acme. If what should I know? And now if you get a negative, to your point, I think, Scott, it can be sour grapes. Maybe they got fired. So obviously triangulate, but maybe you can pick up something thematically. If you get the same thing from a number of people, right? You're to your point, you're going to be stuck in this place for hopefully 4 or 5 more years. It's worth the time. So let's talk about best practices for the job seeker. You've done a great job. You've got a role that feels like a fantastic fit for you. You talked about having a clean resume and updated LinkedIn profile. What else? What other advice?
Practice. I would say practice is the number one thing. It's just like as a sales rep, when we're taking on a new job and you need to practice demoing, because maybe you don't understand the product so well, it's a little complicated. It's practice. So I would highly recommend taking a few practice rounds of interviews with companies you may be a decent fit for. Maybe you even know that the salary isn't going to be a good fit, but still don't just weed out companies right off the bat. Be willing to do a couple practices, 3 or 4 until you get really comfortable. Unless you're comfortable right off the bat. I wasn't. I blew my first interview. I'll just say back in, it was June. It was probably May, or I thought I had a great job. I was a good fit for it. I knew it. But I was so out of practice, and it was a big company, and I blew it. And so I realized I better clean up my resume and clean up the way I approach this and get real comfortable doing this, because things have changed. It's not just, hey, Scott's showing up. He's got a lot of experience. He seems to be, it was right in my field. It was actually perfect. It's not just show up. I had to be good on the interviews. So practice, make sure you understand what they sell and you can articulate back to them what they sell. So you're going to be in for some surprise questions. The good companies actually ask you a few things that maybe you don't expect. What do you know about our culture? What have you heard about us? What about our solutions? Do you know what customers we sell to? Things like that. So, just be ready for that and make sure that you have collateral up and ready. If they catch it off guard, make sure, I always had a few tabs open, like on the news, on the investors, on the company itself, some of the products, their customers. I made sure I had 4 or 5 tabs up always while I was looking in the camera where I could pivot pretty quick. And I also had my resume ready to go too, because sometimes they'll go back a little bit of time where I kind of forget, they'll go back, tell me about, in 2010, what happened there? And I'm like, what was I doing in 2010? It's not top of mind. So then you have it right there. Make sure that you don't overdo it, but make sure that you have a clean view of everything you might need and be willing to pivot fast, because the good companies tend to ask really, really good questions. And the way that they ask them, the ones that were doing it right, I appreciated the questions they were asking. It made sense,
Yeah, and something we teach is behavioral interviewing, right? So very much about what has happened in the past, so that folks, to your point, like they have to recollect. And it's okay if you take a minute to think, oh, gee, I'm trying to remember now. That's fine, but help yourself out. The beauty of doing an interview through Zoom is, to your point, Scott, you can have all your crib notes right there, and the piece of advice I will give you, as a hiring leader, is that, I'll always say, so, when you were at ABC company, can you name me some of the top accounts you're most proud of bringing in? Have a list of your top accounts.
Yes, that's right. Have a couple story. Yes, that was common. They wanted to know a story about, tell me about one of your favorite deals, and so that went well. Tell me about one that didn't go so well. And make sure you understand.
I've got a question I love to ask people, which is, tell me about a deal you should have won but didn't. Right. And what am I looking for? I'm looking to see if people are trying to apportion blame to someone else, as opposed to somebody who's got a growth mindset and is curious and says, yeah, I should have won this. And here's what I learned I did wrong. And here's how I've been doing things differently ever since, So to your point, Scott, write your stories down, have those at your fingertips. Yeah. Yeah. And now you had another point too, a bit more about knowing about the company and what it will be like to be there. What do you want to share there?
So definitely on LinkedIn, they usually have whoever's writing the kind of about on LinkedIn. They usually have a good little couple paragraphs on LinkedIn, about the company. Make sure that you go to the company website and then look at the the products they're selling, the markets they're after, and figure out if they have 10 products, which ones are their priority products too. Which ones they're going after. But come in prepared. Make sure you do the research. Understand the job description, because some of the things, it's easy to glaze over. You say enterprise sales rep, and you look at, you got all these bullet points, and it is important to kind of go through, scan through, and make sure if there's anything that you see that might be different than what you're used to, or some of the responsibility that maybe you don't feel comfortable with. Ask, make sure that you ask. So sometimes with the job fit, what I've learned is it's really important for me to go, listen, if you like to hunt, and this is more of a hunter's role, that's different than named accounts or something like that. They both are they're both enterprise sales jobs, but they're very different. If you're going to work like an enterprise accounts and you got 10 or 15 named accounts and you're going to be working those all the time, doing upsells and renewals and that kind of stuff, that's a much different job than, hey, no, we need you to go out and at least for the first few months, hunt and find qualified prospects on LinkedIn and figure out who are on target market is, that kind of stuff, ideal customer profiles. You need to kind of go through, and they're very different, even though they might look the same at first. So make sure you read the details and that you understand and ask the right questions, because you don't want to get yourself in a spot where, you're completely draw a blank or you make assumptions that aren't true and keep the interview process going. So qualify it, right off the bat.
So interesting, isn't it? When you think about the language you're using and what we use in sales, they're exactly the same, are they not? I mean, as sales executives, sales professionals, we should be the best in the world at getting a job, because we're used to researching an account, qualifying them, understanding what's important to them, aligning to their interests, demonstrating value, right? We know it backwards, but we forget that's what we should be doing in the job search as well.
To your point, exactly. And that's, when I was first starting, I kind of forgot some of that stuff. I was like, what am I doing wrong? And I thought, just be a salesman. You are a salesman, you are a professional, you are interviewing for jobs, and you only need to really land one. So if you put out 160, work the numbers. It's all about prospecting. It's all about preparation, prospecting, making sure you go up to the right jobs, working through the sales cycle, and closing the one that you want. But also in that process, you want to have the ability to close more so you can evaluate and pick the best one that's for you. So you don't want to just hinge everything on one, but it is literally the sales cycle. It's exactly the sales cycle. An enterprise sales cycle is exactly what we're doing.
Perfect. I love it. I can't think of a better way to wrap it up. Scott, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the specifics of your details. I mean, that's really interesting. 25% hit rate. And you are the target persona for these roles. So if anyone else is finding, they're struggling, they're frustrated with the numbers, like there you go, right? 25% for someone who's ideal in the middle of the bullseye for these roles in the hottest market I've seen for years. So really fantastic, so valuable, Scott, and very much appreciate you sharing all that wisdom with us today.
Anytime, Matt. I'm always here for you. I love what you do, and I know you create a lot of value for a lot of people, so I'm always wanting to help.
Thank you, Scott.